And welcome to another episode of Halfway There. This is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. I'm your host, Eric Nevins. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really glad that you have. I hope that you've been enjoying the last couple of episodes with Jan Costas. She's been sharing her story all about how they took the Camino de Santiago last year and all the things that she learned. Well, I promised that we'd have an opportunity to hear from Mike, her husband. That's today. So I've got our conversation with him coming up here in just a moment. Before we get to that, though, I want to let you know, if you're new to the show, go check out halfwaytherepodcast.com. You can get archives and show notes for each and every episode of Halfway There. Also, if you really like the show and you want to give us a good rating, or you want other people to discover the show, it's always helpful to go to iTunes. There's a link right in every show notes page, and at the top of the website, you can always go and give a rating to Halfway There and a review. It helps other people see it. It lets Apple know that people are listening and that people like you might be interested in listening to Halfway There. So thank you so much for doing that. Okay, let's get into this episode. Well, this is a conversation with Mike Costas, and he's hilarious. He's just a great guy. If you listen to the previous couple of episodes, you heard that they had a little bit of tension between husband and wife on the way getting started. And because this was really Jan's journey, it was something that she wanted to do, but they both grew as a result, and their marriage was even stronger, which I just love. Listen for that. I hope you'll enjoy Mike's story and enjoy all of his stories about his experiences from the Camino. So here's my conversation with Mike Costas. Well, hey, Mike.
Yep.
So we're going to go through, because you were also on the Camino, and I can't wait to hear your version of events, because I've heard your wife's a couple times now. And, I mean, you got some explaining to do, so we'll get to that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about you and who you are, and then we'll go kind of. I want to hear more about your story too.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious from the sound. I'm from the South.
Yeah.
And
Alabama?
No. South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
And I did what I was told. My dad told me I had applied to Georgia Tech, hoping to get in there on what they called a work study program, but I had waited too late. So I said, okay, I'll go to the Citadel, which is a military college in South Carolina, because my cousin had gone there, and it's a good school. And kinda, yeah, exactly. It's not one of the best, but anyway. So my dad said, "No, you're not going there. You're going to go to Clemson, and you're going to be an electrical engineer." I said, "Okay." And it was the hardest thing I ever did. I just barely made it. I think when I was there, you could graduate with a 1.8 or a 1.9, and I had 1.8 or 1.9 point, 81 or whatever. So I just barely made it in 5 years, because I wasted a couple of years being the basketball manager, and we would travel and stuff. And I had a great life. I can remember this one night that I was double dating with a guy, and I had the car, and I kept telling him, I need to get home. And he said he was having a good time with his girlfriend, so he didn't want to leave. But finally we left, and I got home, and my folks were not home. They had gone looking for me, and I had gotten home, but I got a spanking for that. So anyway, yeah, my dad was from Cyprus, and had come over to the United States and worked with his brother in a restaurant in North Carolina. And my mom was a little, I'd call her a little country girl, and she had seen him in the restaurant, and he was new to town, and it was a small town.
Oh, and that was noticeable.
Yeah, he was noticeable, and so I think she was flirting with him like Jan was flirting with me at the Oktoberfest parade. She picked me up. I didn't pick her.
Yeah.
She kept coming back and saying all these things.
Because we learned that you skipped church to go to Oktoberfest.
Oh, I was Sunday school superintendent. And I told him, I said, I'm going to the Oktoberfest parade because, I'd heard so much how good it was. And so I'm there half an hour or more on time, which we never are. And so I'm standing there and I've got my camera and I'm taking pictures. And this little girl comes walking by speaking American. And I thought, oh, okay, that's neat. And she walks down, and by the time she got there, about 5 minutes before the parade, I was about 3 or 4 people back. And I could still see everything. But she walks down, maybe 10 people, standing in line there. And she talks to this German guy. And he says, oh, of course, you can stand in front of me because she's so short. Didn't bother him, But she would come back to me during the parade and she'd say, oh, this is that and the other. And I'd say, oh, yeah, okay. And there was this one parade, or one float. I forgot what the front of it was wine country. And the back of it was from Florida. And she came, oh, these guys are from Florida. I said, no, they're not. So that was that. And then at the end of the parade, after everybody was gone, she walks over and she says, there were a bunch of kids that didn't get to come to the parade. Would you be willing to show your pictures? And I said, oh, yeah, I had a program for the parade. So I said, here, give me your contact information. So she gave me her contact information.
Smooth.
Oh, yeah. That's the way she is. And
no, I mean you got her number.
Okay, yeah. And this friend of mine on base, he was an officer also, and he said, listen, why don't you get a date? You can take one of the special service girls. And I said, oh, I don't like those girls. They were dogs. Oh, I hope they're not. I don't think they're still around. They were older. So anyway, yeah. So I called Jan and I said, would you like to go to the Oktoberfest? And of course she said yes, because she'd been trying to pick me up. So I went over and I picked her up that night, and we had such a good time at the Oktoberfest. And so I think we even went back one more time while it was still going. And then we were dating. So we dated for two solid years while I was in Germany. And it was so not neat because for $5, we could go out on the weekend and just have a blast, because the German mark, was only a quarter in dollars. Oh, so wow. We just went all over Germany, and then I'd have to bring her back by Saturday. Well, I'd pick her up Saturday after we had military parade on post, and I'd go pick her up, and we'd go off wherever in Germany, and it was just great. And so we dated for 2 years, and then I came back. Our unit gyroed here to Fort Carson, and so it was going to Germany was the first time I'd ever been out of South Carolina, pretty much. And so going to Germany and then meeting her, and I came home first, and I got here to Fort Carson and said, "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be in the service. You've done your 2 years. You can get out." I went in for the Berlin Wall, and so
What do you mean?
you do remember the Berlin?
I know about the Berlin Wall.
Oh, okay.
I remember what I could. But what do you mean you went in for the Berlin Wall? You went in
because I was in ROTC at Clemson.
Okay.
They said, okay, I was going in for 6 months. So I said, okay, I can go in for 6 months. So they were going to send me to Fort Rucker, Alabama. So while I was taking officer's basic at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, they said, okay, you're going in for 2 years. And I said, I don't want to go to Fort Rucker, Alabama for 2 years. The Army does not put its posts in wonderful places. They are the armpit of the world, except for Munich, which was fantastic. And that's where I was stationed in Germany. So this other guy that was married and had 2 kids, he said, hey, I'll trade with you. So I'm going to Germany. You can go to Germany, and I'll go to Fort Rucker. I said, oh, that sounds like a good idea to me. So we talked to our officer that was for our group, and he said, well, we'll put it forward and we'll see what happens. So in less than a week it came back, no, you're both going to Germany. So I think that was where I went, and I think that was the first step that the Lord did. Oh, and the Berlin Wall went up. Yeah,
it went up while you were there?
No, while I was at school. My
gotcha.
second semester of senior year, I finally had my senior year. So the Berlin Wall went up, and they said, now you're going in for 2 years. And
that's why
I went in.
Gotcha.
For the Berlin Wall. Yeah, and it was the best thing that ever happened, and because I was in Germany, the military wasn't bad. So I was artillery, so it was funny. I had decided, okay, they said, now that you're in for 2 years, you're going to have to pick a branch, and one of them has to be a combat arms. So I said, okay, I'll do infantry because Clemson was infantry. I'll do signal because I'm electrical. I'll do engineers because I'm an engineer. They gave me artillery. That's just the way. And I've talked to numerous guys. That's the way the Army does things. So, but it was a wonderful time. We had a great time. She came back. I came back first. I even got out of the Army before they came back. And when she came back, I took my dad, because we've got relatives in New York, and we went up to New York to visit them, and I picked her up and brought her. She came back to South Carolina and got to meet my folks. And that did not go over well, because my dad wanted me to marry a Greek girl, so that's the way Greeks are. And it just didn't go. So anyway, we broke up because I found a Greek girl down in Louisiana. Yeah. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'll marry a Greek girl. Holy mackerel, that was not good either. So fortunately, they sent me from Louisiana to Pennsylvania. And when I came through, I'd called her and said, could we have a date? And she said, yeah. And she's thinking, oh, this isn't going to work. But it did work. So
that's awesome.
We dated. That was in September, I guess. And in December, we were married. So, and our honeymoon.
It did work.
Yeah. And so 51 years, yeah. So for our honeymoon, we went to St. Louis, because her dad was at Scott Air Base right out of St. Louis. We went to St. Louis and stayed in the Bel Air Hotel, and we could see the arch. It had just been finished right there in '65. And so they said, oh, you're just married. I thought they said, we'll give you a bottle of champagne. And I don't drink. Jan doesn't like champagne, I don't think. She'll drink wine. So we thought, oh, that's wonderful, champagne. So I had a sip, and she had a couple of sips maybe. And the next morning when we were checking out, they said, oh, and your room was this, and the champagne was this. And I thought, oh man, you mean I got to pay? And we've still got the bottle, so that was not good. And our honeymoon consisted of that night plus going back to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I remember we stopped in some motel somewhere, and the water was just rusty. Yeah. Oh my God. We couldn't even shower that night. Yeah. So, and we stayed in a little apartment, and then we got a little house, and we had some friends, and I don't think we didn't go to church then. I don't think.
Well, so let me ask you that.
Yeah.
There, so how did you grew up in
South Carolina.
South Carolina. I was Carolina.
Yeah.
But was it? That's kind of the Bible Belt. So, but were you?
I forgot about that.
Were you Christians or were you what was that?
My dad was Greek Cypriot.
Okay.
So he would not go to the Baptist church that my mom would take me to, and then I got to where I went by myself to church, and BSU and sang in the choir and Baptist Student Union, or BTU, Baptist Training Union. Yeah, because I remember the temperature thing. So anyway, and so when I was 13, I had wanted to join the church before that, but my mom said, no, you're not accountable yet. You got to wait till you're 13. So at 13, I went down, and then that night, they were having baptism, so I went to the church. My mom went with me, and I was baptized. And I can remember being baptized. It was kind of neat. But I found out that what you were supposed to do was go and have like an orientation or an introduction to Christianity or whatever. And I never did. So, but yeah, I'm not like Jan, who got baptized a couple of years ago after thinking,
I was there.
Yeah, I'm a Christian. I need to be baptized. So that's the way she did it. And I just was a Christian. And I have never had the experiences where you go off and drink and carry on and smoke and drugs and all of that. I never had that. So I've had the good life. And it was good, yeah. So, yeah, I had forgotten about that.
But so your faith, you just kind of came to...
As a kid, mostly.
As a kid, yeah.
Yeah, young person, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so interesting that the breadth of experiences in people's stories coming to Christ, because sometimes it is a burning bush, and sometimes that's what I did, and that's who I am, and
that's who I've pretty much always been.
I love that God works that way,
mm-hmm.
and you never know.
Yeah.
All right, so there's that. So take us up. Take us through a little bit of your journey. What were some of the significant events and growth opportunities that you had? Because we're going to get to the Camino, but I want to bridge that gap a little bit because I'm guessing, I don't want to skip 50 years.
Being the engineer and everything, like my dad told me I'd be.
Yeah. Do you regret that? Like,
I wish I'd taken something different.
Yeah.
It kind of bothers me. Yeah, because it was just so hard. But I realized it was a good thing. I had and because we got married basically right out of the military, we've had good experiences. We, like I say, I moved up to Harrisburg, and I would come down. We even went to the Playboy Club.
Oh, wow.
And you probably don't even know what Playboy is, do you?
Oh, yeah, I know what it is.
Oh, you know the magazine? Okay. So...
I've heard about the articles.
Yeah, they were some pretty risque. But some of them were well done. But anyway, they had these clubs that you could go and get a steak and a drink and the sides and stuff, I think it was less than $25 or something. And the food was great, and the girls would come around in these skimpy or not skimpy, not much clothing, and had bunny ears, and they would do the bunny dip. You know, when they'd put the food on the table, they would kind of squat rather than just put the food on the table. So, and Jan went. We actually had our bachelor party there. No, was it the bachelor party? You didn't go? Oh, okay. I thought you went. So my dad and my best man, who was one of her good friends, and her dad, I think, went. And we just had a blast.
I don't think those are around anymore.
Yeah. No, they're not. Yeah. They went out with, golly, a long time ago. But they were very nice, and we would go down because it was so inexpensive. We would go down on the weekend and go to the Playboy Club in Baltimore, and it was good. I mean, the food was good, the waitresses were pretty, and they had good entertainment. I can Brother Dave Garraway, who was a comedian that I liked, was there, and one other guy, several other good people that I liked were there. So we just enjoyed that. That was kind of our big night out, and we lived near Hershey, and I can remember we had the one car which Jan would take, and then I bought a scooter so I could go back and forth to work. And some guy, it was pitch dark, but I had a headlight on it was a little Sears Vespa scooter, and he turned left in front of me, and I hit him, and for some reason Sears came back a couple of weeks later, or a month maybe, and said, "Do you still want that scooter?" And I said, "No," and I'd been paying on it, and I said, "No, I don't think so," because it was wrecked. And so they took it back, and wow, I don't remember how I got to work, but anyway, I did. And it was building a transmission line across Pennsylvania and Maryland and Jersey, and it was just a great experience. And then from that, I went to coal-fired and other fossil fuel powerhouses, and I kept trying to tell them I want to go overseas, because the company I was working for was international, and they even came to site. I could not believe it. They came to site and to get engineers to go to India, and they didn't even talk to me. I thought, okay, that does it. I'm going to go overseas on my own. And so I had been watching the magazines, and there was this one for Saudi Arabia. And I thought, oh, okay. So I sent them my resume, and it came back, no, we don't need you. And then I got a call from a headhunter, and he said, hey, I've got a job offer for you. Would you come to New York, bring your wife? And I'd never done anything like that. Yeah. Because I couldn't afford it. So they said, yeah, bring your wife, and we'll talk about this. So I went, and we talked, and the first, it was Indonesia. And I thought, ooh, that sounds good. And I was excited about that one. And they said, or you can go to North Dakota. And I thought, I don't want to go to North Dakota. I'd rather go to Saudi Arabia. So we went to Saudi Arabia. And like she said, we were 3 kids and pregnant. So our son was born there. And at that time, it was the best thing we ever did, because the schools were great. The housing, you paid a few $100s or whatever, and you didn't pay utilities, and they had everything we needed. It was like a small military compound, and it was different than going out on the economy. But I can remember we went to this one place, a fishing village not far from us, and I had put on an Arab thobe and gutra, and Jan had the abaya, the black dress that the women wear, where you're just a black blob. She had worn that, and I was looking at some pictures later, and here was this Arab guy talking to my son, and I couldn't remember that happening. And then I looked, and it was me, because I think I even had a beard then.
Wow!
And it was such a great experience.
Well, what was great about it?
I had responsibility, and I had the authority to handle it and take it out and do it. And I was building infrastructure for 2 camps that were Aramco. One was Ras Tanura, which was on the seashore, and they have the prettiest beaches. Oh, they're so beautiful. And white sand and hot. And then we could go out in the water, and it was like being in a bathtub. And that's the way it is at home in South Carolina. It's like being and I love that. I don't like cold water. And I don't like snow either that much. But here I am. So
we haven't had that much this year.
No, which is good. And but the schools were fantastic, and we would bring in national, U.S. national entertainment. We had B.J. Thomas right after he had accepted Christ, and some of the other entertainers that you don't know, they were Christian, and then some of them weren't. But yeah, it was just a, like I said, we had everything we possibly needed.
Good place.
And they paid my taxes, so everything I made was tax free.
Oh,
so
nice.
you can't beat that.
No, you
and the
can't.
medical care was pretty darn good too, until my cat bit me one night, protecting her kittens that she had put in bed with us, and the dog jumped up on the bed, and the cat went to get him and got my leg. That thing swole up so bad. And here's where the Lord comes in. I had waited and waited, and we had to fly from our community into the headquarters in Dalron. And the doctor that was there was specializing in animal bites.
Wow.
I think I may have been his only patient while he was there, but he was there for me. And so that was a good thing.
Wow, how cool.
Yeah.
What was the spiritual climate like there?
We had churches.
Yeah.
Each community had its own little church, and we met in at the theater, and in the gym, and in Dalron, the headquarters. Our daughter is still there. They went back. She took her husband back, and because she loves it there, and they go in the school gym. They meet in the gym because they're so big. So yeah, but yeah, and in camp between ourselves, we could talk Christ, but you didn't dare mention it on the outside of camp or to an Arab that was in the camp. You cannot do that. So we honored that, and the kids got a good Christian education too. So yeah, and it was neat. Our son, let's see, I think Melissa and Danielle were baptized there, and then when Lyle went into the Air Force National Guard here in Colorado, he went down to San Antonio, Texas, and when we went down for his graduation, he showed me his baptismal certificate. So he's been baptized, and he goes to church now too. So that was a good thing. So yeah, I always felt that that verse where it says, "If you raise a child, he'll come back."
Yeah,
and he did. So it's good. Yeah. So, yeah, and we were able to have church. And then we came back from Saudi, and Jan went through that experience at the church. I've seen her, it amazes me. I mean, she prayed for her Bible. She couldn't find it. She prayed for her Bible and went downstairs, and it was in the basement for some reason. And the Lord just said, "Here's your Bible," and she found it. So yeah, so we've had some great experiences. And then I went overseas. I think, well, the one time was in Turkey, and the job was, no, I went over twice. I'm sorry. I went over twice. Once was to start the embassy there in Cyprus, and that's when I walked on water and got fired the next month because I had, they told us, our kids, with the company I was with, which was FBO, Foreign Buildings Organization in the government, that we could not have our kids going to the dance clubs that everybody else in the embassy was going to. So anyway, I got word that the kids were at the dance club, and I went to get them in the company van, and that's what got me fired. Well, they didn't want me driving the company van, so at night on personal stuff. But it was behind my car, and I didn't want to take the time to back it out, back my car out, pull it back in, all that mess. So, and rightfully so, I got terminated. They call firing now termination and all kind of fancy names, layoffs. So
it still hurts though.
It's still firing.
Yeah. Did that? How did that affect your faith? I mean, did you feel
Getting fired?
Did you feel like you trusted
didn't
God?
Bother me. No.
For a lot of people, that's a crisis. But did you were like,
I had other times.
Okay.
I can't.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, where else did you?
I can't remember a time when I got fired, because after I left Aramco, I got fired, terminated, laid off several times, and just different circumstances. Some of it was my fault, some of it wasn't. I got terminated at Saudi because they had to have room for other Saudi students that were coming back that had been trained. Mm-hmm. So that was what that was about, and I thought, oh, okay. But we had been there 12 and a half years, and it was a great experience.
Yeah.
We would have been there yet if I wasn't so stinking old. Yeah. But whenever I did get terminated, it wasn't too long, except for that time coming back, because people weren't sure if you were familiar with the American codes. But in Saudi, we built even better than the American code, I think, because of the standards that we had. But so I got laid off there, and it took about 2 years before I found a job. So wow. the great payoff that they gave me was just about gone when I got the job, and I that was with a local engineering firm here in Denver, and then that one I got laid off on because I screwed up, and then I think from there we went to, I went back to Turkey, or went to Turkey and worked, and Jan came over after the first year, and we were able to visit the probably 5, I think, of the 7 churches that are in Turkey,
wow.
which makes it that much more alive.
Yeah,
because you hear Pamukkale is a village right outside of, I think it was Laodicea, and you could look from Laodicea to Pamukkale, and they talked about the hot springs that were there in the Bible, and now it's salts and stuff have been coming off the hillside so much, and there's little pools. It's a beautiful place.
Oh, cool.
And so we did that trip, and then she came back home to be with the kids, and I stayed another year, and then the last time I went overseas when I couldn't find a job was back to Saudi, and I was in the village called Kafji, which is where the Iraqis came in during what started the Gulf War, and you could see bullet holes and stuff in the housing. And they told this was a Japanese camp. It had been a Japanese company, so it was Japanese people that ran it pretty much, and initially. And they told me that when the American troops came through, they did more damage, taking stuff from people's homes than the Iraqis did. So that was kind of a down thing. But what was neat there, I was able to go out in the desert with these guys, these Arab guys I was working with, and just watch them. And it was fantastic. We had what they call a kapsa, and that's a plate of rice about 3/4 the size of this table. And then they put a half a goat or a half a sheep on top of it.
Oh, wow.
And you sit across from each other, and I'll hold the carcass while you pull off meat, and then you'll hold it while I pull off meat.
Oh, wow.
And you just sit there and you eat with your bare hands. You eat with your right hand only, because that's the clean hand. They do not, maybe they do now, but when we got there, you do not do anything with your left hand, because that's the hand. They pour water. They've got a spigot or a little hose that they squirt on themselves, and then they clean it off with their left hand. So you don't do anything with an Arab with your left hand. That is forbidden, and that's why. So, but I got to know the Arabs there in 2 years better than I did in 10 years in the Aramco community, where it was mostly U.S. people.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I would go down on the weekend, which was Thursday and Friday back then, to Dhahran, where my daughter was, and go to church with them. So I still had plenty of Christian experience.
Yeah.
And the food was good.
Huh. Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we're skipping a lot here, but let's go to the Camino, because this is kind of what we're talking about. So Jan shared her story, and she made very clear how she felt about you guys together.
That was not true at all.
Okay, well, I want to hear your perspective, right? So how, when she comes to you and says, I want to go do this 500-mile walk, what were you thinking? Because you're a marathon, you're like a fit guy.
Yeah.
You run marathons, which I still don't understand.
Yeah. It takes 7 hours, so yeah, I don't understand it either. But I didn't want her going alone.
Okay.
That was my problem. I just didn't think it would be that safe. I do now, but I didn't think it then, because I didn't know what it was about.
Right, sure.
And so she says, I'm going to go. Well, she does that a lot. We were going to buy an Airstream trailer 2 months ago. Thank goodness she got she threw that out the door, because we would have had to buy. We would have probably had to sell the house.
Right.
Those things are expensive. So I thought, okay, she'll get over it. She won't do it. Holy mackerel, she just kept. And I just sat back and let her do all of the work, because I figured, what am I going to do? I'll just go along and I'll support her, like I said several times before she got the message. And I kept telling her, I'm here to support you. But boy, was that a mistake, because when we started, her pace was like, stop. I'm telling you. I had to back up to keep up. And it was not very comfortable, because if you...
I'm not laughing at Jan, by the way.
If you listen to anybody that's done the Camino, they will tell you walk your own pace. And I thought, okay, I'll walk my own pace. But good grief, she'd get out of sight behind me. So I'd have to come back and make sure she was safe because that's what I was worried about. And then it took me a week or more, 3 days or 3 weeks, 3 days to realize that walking with her was a benefit, because you'd start running into these people that, oh, I can't go on. I'm finished. My knee is done, or my ankle is done, or my feet are just toast, you know. So I slowed down to stop and walked with her, and it really was a benefit, because in the end we really bonded like we've never done in 50 years. So it was wonderful that way. I didn't get hurt. I had 2 little bitty blisters the whole time. And I don't know why that was, but it was just 2 blisters. And I told her, I said, I got a blister. Did I get the blister queen? Never. So my blisters popped. But she did. You remember? Yeah. You never said a thing about, oh, here, let me take care of your blister. So
it's different when it's
it's your own. Yeah,
it's always different.
And by slowing down and staying with her, I could watch her, like she said, with all these kids or old people or whoever. And I'm not like that.
Yeah, right.
I don't do that.
Because you're kind of goal driven, I heard.
And that was true. I wanted to get to the end and get the certificate. But I slowed down and stayed with her.
So when your mindset going into it was, okay, I'm going to go and just sort of protect your wife.
Right.
But
I thought she could walk. It was like crawl. Because if she stopped and talked to somebody, like she said, oh, I stopped at the restaurant or the bar and I helped these Canadian women. It was an hour later, but when she finished protecting their feet, they were good. But that was where so, and then the other thing I could see was the beauty of the Camino. It's beautiful country. And so I really appreciated that. My actual first step with the Lord on the Camino was at DIA. And I didn't realize it was going on.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I had, when you go, being retired military, I can go to the USO lounge, which is out of sight. Boy, you get free food and coffee and drinks and apples and oranges and just all kind of, you don't have to go wait in line. It's right there. And so when you come in, you have to show them your military ID, and then you can go and take whatever you want and sit down at the table, read the paper, and all of a sudden I realized I don't have my military ID. It's not any, and I'm searching, and I'm the kind of person when they lose something, or I was, when you lose something, you search the house. Every inch of it, or wherever you are, you start searching. So I did that. I went over to where I'd put my backpack in the shelves. No ID card. And I looked around where I'd gotten coffee and a sandwich. No ID card. And I said, okay, well, I'll just wait. And when we get back, I'll get a replacement ID. And I was sitting there drinking my coffee and eating my sandwich. And this guy comes over and he says, is this your ID card? And I looked at it, and it was my ID card.
Wow.
The Lord got this guy to bring it over to me. So that was the first time. And then Jan told you about the second time. We're up on top of the Pyrenees in this fog, and I'm waiting on her to get her backpack ready and get her water working. And I'm starting to walk circles so I could see her, so I wouldn't lose her. And I'm walking, and I'm getting further out in my circle, and here's this huge sign. I mean, this thing was 10 foot by probably 5 foot maybe, and there's a yellow arrow on it, and it's saying that way. And I'm looking, and I can't see it. Like she said, you can't see the path. Yeah. So I said, I called her over when she was finished, and I said, here it is, and we're supposed to go this way. Those two ladies on the road are going to be lost. And I said, I don't know where, and they're walking fast. I don't know. So we went down the road, and then I see a stake with an arrow on it, and another stake about 5 foot, and then, and it just kept going. And we got to that point where we broke apart, and I thought, there's a lot of people on here, so I better get down to Roncesvalles pretty darn quick, or we're not going to have a place to sleep tonight. And so Jan said, well, I'm going to take this not so steep place, and I'm going to go this way on this path. And I didn't think the one that they said was steep, and they did. They said it was steep. I didn't think it was that steep. So I went on down to Roncesvalles, and I got there 30 minutes to 45 minutes before she came in. And there wasn't much of a line then. So I got in line, and I got to the door, and the guy said, I said, I need to get a bed for 2 people. He said, well, where's the second one? I said, she's coming. And he said, well, you got to wait till she comes. But they finally, after the lines got so long, they let me in. And I went in, and he said, well, you can't sign in until your wife gets here. So I'm waiting for Jan. She finally comes, and we go in. They give us a bed on the 3rd floor, because the other 2 floors are just solid bunk beds. They had just finished renovating in the summertime the 3rd floor with these cubicles and twin beds. So nice. The Lord was looking after us that time. So yeah. And there was another time when we were getting ready to go to the Cruz de Ferro, which is this tall telephone pole. It's twice as big as any telephone pole I've ever seen. And on top is this little teeny iron cross, Cruz de Ferro. Uh-huh. So I ran on ahead and left her there, so because it was one little village, and I didn't know how many albergues, I call it albergues, they had. But when I'm coming in, here's this friend of ours says, oh, we're right up here in this albergue, and they've still got room. So I went up there and signed in, and then he and I went back and went to catch up with Jan, and like she said, she bit our heads off.
She was having a bad day.
Yeah. Oh, geez. And so we got a bed. We had beds, and that's when she met Candace, and that girl is amazing. So yeah, it was. And we were going into, I don't remember the name of these Spanish places. But we're walking along the street, and here's a green praying mantis. And I had on a one of those lime green shirts. That thing crawled up my leg and up my shirt. And I'm telling Jan, you got to get this thing off of me because it thinks I'm a mate, and it's going to eat my head. I really was concerned that he might bite me, but she finally, after he got up on my neck, she took him off, or her off.
It's like a 1% of your size.
Yeah. But that thing's got. Have you ever seen the claws or the jaws on that thing? Jeez, it could take a bite out of you. Oh, but yeah, so, I really wasn't afraid. Right. I didn't like it crawling on me either, and I didn't want to swat it because I figured I'd, hurt it. So
that's awesome.
But then one other day we were climbing up or hiking up a mountain, and we got to this little village, and the one albergue was open, but no beds. They had already filled them all. And so we'll just go around to the other one. It was closed. I could not believe it. So we didn't have a place to sleep. And we were sitting outside eating, and this guy came up with, he was Mexican, and his name was Jesus. And so Jesus and I were sitting there talking, and he said, Jan can take my bed, and you and I will go over and we'll sleep on the church grounds, because it was nice grass and everything. I said, oh, that sounds good. So after a while, his daughter came out of the albergue, and she was all huffy and stuff, and she threw her backpack against the wall across the street, and she says, I'm not sleeping here tonight. And Jesus says, what's the matter? And then the lady that owned the place came out, and man, they were jawing at each other in Spanish, you know. And Jesus went in to talk to her and try and calm her down, the albergue owner. And what had happened, the girl had gone in and ordered something to eat, and people had come in after her and had gotten their food, and she was still waiting. So she started jawing at the young man who was the woman's that owned the place son.
Oh no.
Yeah, and they got into an argument, and then the mom got into the argument. So they walked on up the hill, and they were going to sleep up at the name of, it's these iron or steel plate silhouettes that are up there of pilgrimage people. And so they said, hey, y'all take our beds. So we took their beds. Jesus gave us his bed.
Nice.
And then after that, Christ kept, I would lose stuff and he would bring it to me or get me to find it. And I had lost, I didn't lose it. I knew where it was. It was under my pillow in Jesus's bed. So we got to the next place we were going to stay. What happened, I realized I had left my money belt, which you want to keep your money and passport with you.
Right.
So I had left it under the pillow. And I tried to get this lady where we wanted to stay the next place, and she was full. So I thought, oh boy. So Jan finally came into the village, and she was walking and talking with this guy, and we found a place right across the street that was excellent. And this guy she was talking to was Spanish, but had been living in, I think, New York or wherever. And I couldn't get that lady the first place. She wouldn't help me at all. So this guy got our new landlord or albergue host to call back to the place where we had stayed, and they said, oh yes, we found it. And so then he helped me get a taxi. The taxi took me back to the village. Took about 5 minutes by car, maybe 10. and I walked in, and I said, do you have my passport? Oh yeah, and your money. I said, oh boy. So I took it, got back in the taxi, and he took me back to where we were spending the night. And so that was another time.
Yeah.
And we went up to that one village where it was a nunnery, and they wanted you to go up and ring the bell. So I went up and rang the bell, and I rang it hard because we had been walking hard. And it was what they call a donativo. You just put money in, whatever you can afford. So if you're like a lot of the pilgrims that don't have a job and stuff, they just go in and they eat and they have, but we put in our money. And all of a sudden I'm looking, and my little wallet, I had my credit cards and my daytime money in this little green trifold wallet. It was gone. I thought, oh gosh. So I'm doing my searching all over the place. And then Jan was telling one of her friends again, my husband lost his wallet, and that guy started looking for it. And what had happened, he found it, and Jan brought it to me. He found it behind the donation box. When I put my money in the donation box, I dropped my wallet behind it, and I didn't look behind it. So, yeah, there was the Lord again. And then Jan told you about the drop in the shoe, and her sleeping bag. And we have this friend in L.A. actually, and her friend and excuse me, her friend is friends with Martin Sheen and his son, who had done the movie The Way. And when it's Martin Sheen's grandson. So Martin Sheen's grandson had done The Way and told his dad, Julio Estevez, about what a great experience it was. So Julio says, well, we'll do a movie. And so when they were doing the movie, Julio's son fell in love with this Spanish girl there and married her. And so they used the movie, or they stayed at the hotel. And we said, well, and our friend in L.A. says, well, why don't you go stay at this hotel? It's in Burgos. So we got to Burgos. We went to the tourist office and asked them. Jan said, here's this hotel. Where is it? And they said, it's not Burgos. It's in the next village.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So we spent the night in Burgos. Next morning we got up. We went to that little village. And we said, where's this hotel? And, we met this lady that was living there. She was sweeping out her house. And so we asked her, and using what little bit of Spanish we had and what little bit of English she had, hotel wasn't in that village. So that night we stayed in albergue, and it was really neat. The next morning we got up and I told Jan, I said, there's a phone number here for that hotel. And so we called the hotel, and they said, we'll be over. We've been expecting you. We'll be right over and pick you up and bring you out here. So they said, just go down, and there's a seat or a bench down here. Just sit there, and we'll pick you up. So we're sitting there at the bench, and Jan's talking to this guy there. He had done the Camino innumerable times, and so it was a good experience talking to him. And they took us over to the hotel, gave us nice twin bedroom, and fed us that night, fed us the next morning, never charged us a cent.
Wow.
So nice. And the place was gorgeous. It had a river, pretty much a river. It was maybe a stream probably, running underneath it. And it was an old mill place that they had converted into this hotel. Yeah. And then that morning, there's a thing that they do in Santiago, in the cathedral. They have it's the second largest incense burner. And they put incense in it. And then these 6 guys over on the side pull that thing up. And then this guy he doesn't get a running start, but he pushes it. And these 6 guys over on the side pull that thing up. And then it starts swinging across the width of the cathedral. And the reason they do that is because in the old days, the pilgrims stunk so bad that was the only way they could hold a service was to put the incense in. but it's not so bad now. So,
No, except showers.
Yeah. And the food, the food is fantastic. We were at this one hotel, and Jan saw this old lady. Well, she wasn't old. She wasn't as old as we are. So she was sitting over there, and Jan was watching her, and I couldn't turn around and watch because it just wasn't kosher. So she had taken a half a tomato and squished it onto a piece of toast and rubbed it into the toast after she had put the olive oil and salt on it, and then she rubbed the tomato over it. That was breakfast. You ought to try it. It is delicious and that easy.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing that we got a lot of was the café con leche, coffee with milk. And they make the milk hot so that it doesn't cool off the coffee. Right. And then they have a thing that is as big as a plate, and it's called a tortilla. And that is a cut up potato or potatoes, and you cook them with onion and a lot of olive oil, and then you break 6 eggs, put that in there, and let that cook, and then you flip it over onto the plate, and then put some more olive oil in, and slide it back onto the frying pan, and it needs to be a non-stick frying pan, by the way, and cook it for that one about 2 or 3 minutes till it cooks the liquid that was on top. And that's what we've been having for breakfast pretty much the whole time. And there's a thing they call the Pilgrim meal, the Peregrino meal menu. It's 3 different courses. First one is either a salad, a pasta, or soup. And the soups are good. Oh my gosh, they're good. And we tried to make the garlic soup, but it didn't turn out so good here. But it was okay there. The second dish is your main dish, and it's either beef, fish, lamb, pork, with French fries. Everything. Eggs come with French fries. And so...
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Oh, and they're different because the French fries there are not frozen and then fried.
Right.
They're fresh. They cut them
so much better. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's good. And then the last part is either this. I call it commercial ice cream, but it's different from what we have here. They're popsicles with fudge and chocolate and nuts and all kinds of stuff on it. Or flan, which is creme caramel and fruit, and all that for $10, €10.
Wow!
And the euro is about $1 now. So, yeah, and they bring you a drink, which I had water. Jan had wine just about every night, and
I like her right better.
And it's and it's all included in that 10 reals or €10. And in the morning, you get up and you go out, and if you for breakfast they'll give you toast and coffee basically with marmalade, and that's 3 reals. And then you go down the street and you get for €5, you get the tortilla, which is that egg and potato thing, and coffee, and it the whole way. Oh, and I got one of the best hamburgers in the world. It was wonderful. Oh my gosh. We walked up to this little place and the people next door had a hamburger, and I looked over there and I told her I wanted that. And it was, so good.
Oh, sounds
good.
Yeah. There's something about the food of a place that really, I have a mentor who will describe it. And I've heard this from you guys, you know, it's very elemental, right? And by that he literally means it's like, you know, the bread and the wine, and very like the communion, where, you know, it just binds you together, and it does something in your spirit to kind of connect you to the place. And I hear that in your kind of description of all this great food, and it's making me kind of hungry. Actually.
Yeah. And the meat, that was the other. The meat is only maybe a 1/4 inch thick. Not like these things we get here about an inch thick. And so much tastier than it is here. I don't know what they do, but boy, it is tasty.
So cool.
Yeah. And like I said, when we first started out, I said, I am not coming back here to finish this next year, but I'd go back in a heartbeat. And I would even do the same route. But I'm thinking maybe not this year, but next year we might go do the Portuguese route. But even now, if something goes battywonkus, I am not the kind of person that cleans the house looking for that one coin. I'm waiting for the Lord to bring it to me. And He does. I mean, even now, after, 2-3 months later, I'm finding stuff or it's coming to me.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you learned to trust on the route. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And still, yeah.
Very cool.
It is such a beautiful memory. Yeah.
Well, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that. Mike, thanks so much for sharing your story. I know that this was a really meaningful experience for you, and it was wonderful to hear the ways that God changed you. It sounds like He really set the tone at the very beginning, and that was what you took away from it, that God was always looking out for you, even if you were losing your stuff. So I think that is that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Guys, if you enjoyed this show, would you do me a favor? Go out to halfwaytherepodcast.com. You can see the show notes, but then there's share buttons on each and every episode. You could go ahead and share those on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm on all those. You can just tag Halfway There Podcast, and I should see it. I would love to hear from you, too. If you enjoy the show, if you've done the Camino, let me know. Leave a comment. Hit me up on Facebook. I'd love to hear what that experience was like for you. And maybe if you want to go on the Camino, let me know that too. I'd love to hear what you took away from it and the experience that you would like to have. Once again, please share the show if you enjoyed it. And I guess next time, you know what? Next time is episode 50. And I can't wait to bring that one to you. It's pretty exciting. So we'll see you then. Keep the faith, friends.